Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 2, The Maker of the Gods from the Ways of the Lonely Ones, by Manly P. Hall. The Maker of the Gods. Once in an ancient eastern country now forgotten, in a city whose name has not been spoken for ages, there lived a potter who had spent many years in the study of his craft. To him, clay was something more than a kind of earth. It was a living thing, a wondrous companion. From it he molded the jars and dishes used in the city and in the small towns of the region. He was one of the most skilled at his trade, and for many years had been the favored pupil of the master potter of the land. When the master passed away, his favorite pupil was admitted by all to be the most remarkable potter the world had ever known, and his skill was the envy of all his fellow craftsmen. On the potter's wheel he molded strange shapes and beautiful forms of clay, and baked them in the little kiln in his shop. A most remarkable man was this potter. All who saw him at work felt that he was more than a molder of clay. The soft touch of his fingers and the delicate lines which he brought into being on the turning wheel were little short of marvelous. This remarkable molder of clay had a secret dream, an ideal which he had cherished for many years, for time passed slowly in that little city, and the ages had left few marks of their passing. The potter had always dreamed of the day when his fingers should mold more glorious forms. The genius of a great creator was in his soul. He had the same sublime thoughts that must have animated the minds of the lords of creation when they molded man and the universe from the senseless clay of chaos. So, far away from the busy labors of the day, this potter worked on his great ideal, and in the secret recess of a hidden room of his shop, he molded a wondrous figure out of clay. It seemed that when he was alone with this work, his fingers were animated with a power not their own, a power which through him was slowly modeling the clay into a form the like of which had never been seen by mortal eyes. The figure was that of a strange, supernatural being. Even the potter did not know why he had molded it, but his fingers brought into being lines and forms that were not of this world. One day, as he stood lovingly molding and caressing the clay, a strange light suddenly filled the little room and illuminated the mind and soul of the potter. A voice from the silence, perhaps from the center of his own being, spoke to him. "Long have you molded the clay into vessels and forms inanimate, but now the dream of the master potter is to be realized. The things which you have molded shall from now on be living beings, not merely forms of clay. The years of your apprenticeship have been well served, and you are chosen to be a molder of gods. The figure you have labored with so long and molded so gloriously into a being celestial shall indeed live. From now on you shall make no more urns and water vessels, for with the finishing touch of the master's hand, every object that you make shall become divine." A great peace descended upon the soul of the potter as he fell on his knees in prayer. The great dream which had filled him for years was to be realized. He was to be more than a molder of men. He, the humble potter, should mold with his fingers glorious beings to live forever as gods. With a last caressing touch, the statue was finished, and the potter stepped back to view the work of his hands. As he did so, a pale glow shone from the figure, bathing it in a soft radiance of light. Slowly the clay came to life, its gray lines turning into the living tints of flowing light. Before he realized it, the potter's statue was a living, breathing thing, and the streams of glory pouring from it almost blinded the aged man. He fell on his knees before the work of his hands, and the god, for in truth it was a god who stood before him, held out his arms, and the lips so late of clay spoke to their creator, "You are indeed my maker and have formed me from the senseless clay, and I, the god of your hand, pay homage to your creator and to you. For it has been predestined from the beginning of time that there should come into the world a great potter who, with the skill of his fingers, should fashion wondrous things. You are he. Farewell." As the potter watched, the glorious figure spread its wings of rainbow tints until it seemed that the whole room was filled with the radiance. Suddenly the ceiling opened and a great light shone down from the heavens to bathe the newborn god in an ineffable splendor. Slowly the figure raised its face, gleaming with animation and power, stretched forth its arms to the light, and cried out in a voice which seemed to shake the very house and which thrilled the potter to the depths of his soul, "Father, thy creation comes." And the being of light spread its glorious wings and flew straight toward the gleaming doorway of light to vanish from the potter's eyes. The strange light also disappeared, and the potter's little cottage appeared as before. But the soul of the craftsman thrilled with ecstasy, and his fingers fairly sang as he started to model another figure from the shapeless clay. The years passed by. Still the potter formed his gods of lowly earth, and as the last touch was placed on each, it came to life, and spreading its wings, soared heavenward to vanish forever amid the stars. Gradually, people of the city learned of his secret, and from all parts of the world they came to see the man who could mold from earth creatures that lived, who could mold clay into wings that could fly to the heart of the light itself. The wise man came and asked him his secret. The foolish laughed and said he was insane. The superstitious whispered that his works were of the devil, but the potter knew that they were of his Father in heaven. One day, while many gathered around and watched him at work, molding the clay with fingers which grew younger and swifter with the passing years, the potter spoke of his secret. From the clay of the earth and all things earthy must man mold the gods of his dreams. From the sticks and stones which surround him he must form the wings to bear aloft his innermost ideals. We are all makers of gods. From the clay of our own being we form wondrous ones, creatures which even with their wings of mud can fly to the footstool of divinity. As he spoke, the eyes of the potter lighted up. His voice thrilled with the inspiration of his soul, while his face, framed in silver locks, seemed to glow with the same ineffable light that surrounded the gods he had molded. The wise men stood in silence, for they felt the presence of a mighty one. They heard the voice of God speaking from the lips of the potter. As the form before him grew in grandeur, the potter continued, "All men who come into the world are potters, molding from their own clay the sacred ornaments of their Father's house. Into the pots and urns which they mold are poured the waters of life. But those whose souls are the urns molded on the potter's wheel of life, the endless wheel of birth and death, those whose cups are fired by the flame of suffering, they are the master potters of all, for from their own dead clay they shall mold gods whose spreading wings shall protect them from the terrors of darkness." The scientists silently bowed their heads. The philosophers looked at one another, for though they knew not whereof the potter spoke, they felt the power of his words. At last the figure was finished, and the potter fell on his knees in silent prayer before it. Once again the light came down from above, and a great life entered the form of clay. Slowly it changed from the misty mold of matter to the shining garment of divinity, and a glorious figure, bathed in rosy light, held out its arms and bowed its head in humility before the potter who had brought it into existence. Those who had come to watch stood back in awe. Such sights as these were not of men, and one stepped forward in reverence to kiss the hem of the potter's robe. The living statue raised its fingers once more to the light, and the soft flutter of its wings seemed to whisper with the voice of angels, "Yonder is the way of light. Farewell, O Creator," and turning its face upward spoke, "Father, I come at thy call." Springing up and spreading mighty pinions, the newborn god soared upward to the light. Slowly a sigh passed around the group of silent watchers who knelt in prayer by the side of the humble potter. One whispered in a hushed voice, "We have seen a man with his own hands produce a god, molding its living form from the clay of the valley. This man is indeed inspired of God." Another turned to the potter, saying, "O Father, since you can form these wondrous beings of life which soar straight upward to the footstool of the Almighty, why do you stay in darkness here below? If you can produce these forms celestial, you are indeed a god yourself. Fashion wings for yourself and fly upward also, for you must be a god." The potter crossed his hands upon his breast and, bowing silently, shook his head, and in a voice filled with sweet humility replied, "My son, I am not God. I am only one who molds clay. I am a maker of gods, but am myself a creature of the earth." Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.